all for being here tonight. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak with each and every one of you. And before I go too much farther, I have to do this. And I don't normally correct my introductions, which was very gracious and kindly, but my college of Bowdoin College would not be happy with me and I didn't correct the name. So
it's a Southern thing.
All right, I'll accept that. I did go to the University of South Carolina for 2 years as well. So, and again, thank you for being here. I want to thank the South Carolina League of Women Voters and Barbara Zia as well for the invitation here tonight. I want to thank the Francis Marion, Francis Marion University as well, and President Carter. So very much appreciated to have the chance. What I'd like to do this evening is, one, keep my comments brief, but I do want to let you all know that in addition, and I know I'm going to get some questions on the scorecard. I already know that. I've already had some questions on the scorecard, but that's fine. I'd like to focus a little bit tonight on giving you an idea what the study that ACEEE is doing for not only the state of South Carolina. South Carolina is a sort of a line, if you would. We've got a number of states that we are going to be working with or have worked with already. And so it's my hope to introduce to you what the elements of that study are, what it's produced in one other state, at least at this stage, and what it is we hope to produce at the end of it in terms of a resource or a tool for the state of South Carolina in terms of finding where your energy efficiency opportunities are as they impact or improve upon the state's economy. See, it's the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. So everything we do is based on sort of an economic approach. With that in mind, I'll start it. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE, I have to do this. It's a 30-year, we've been in operation now for about 30 years. Washington-based think tank, we have about 40 different people. We've increased our size about double in the last 18 months, and that's a sign of the times, I think, a sign of the importance of energy efficiency. It is huge. And we focus on end-use efficiency. That's important. We look at industry, we look at buildings, we look at utilities, transportation. We have a full economic analysis team. We do we just recently added a human behavior component to what we do because we realize that behavioral change is as important as technological change. We also look against state and national policy. Funding, many people want to know how we're funded. That leads you to believe what our perhaps independent nature is. ACEEE takes great pride in the fact that we're not a membership organization. We're not driven by our funding. We diversify. We have, in fact, I have here, if anybody wants to look at it, probably 60 or 70 different funding sources coming from every which way of all of the things that I've talked about here before. We get a large amount of our support, if you will, from our own conferences. So what's the critical point of energy efficiency? Why do we care? We just recently completed a revisit, if you will, of a study we did 5 years ago. What is the cost of energy efficiency? What is this, actually, this resource? What is the cost? It was about 3 cents when we did the study 5 years ago. It was a more limited and focused study then. There weren't as many states that were really involved with really robust programs. This year, we included about 14 different states and went deep into the different programs of those states. We found that, in fact, energy efficiency is 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So you can see, just by pure resource, which one are you going to go for first? We argue not that you should not build new generation. We know that that's going to happen. But do the efficiency first. So quickly, I'll get through this. The scorecard we produced yesterday, we published yesterday. It's the 3rd year in a row that we've done this rate the states, as some people ineloquently call it. We do look at 6 different program areas or different track, if you will, and it's really the comprehensive application of those 6 different areas that gets a state where it needs to go. You can't just focus on the utility programs or on the transportation, or you have to really look at all of the opportunities across the board. And that's the point of the scorecard. And each year we put this out there, and we, trust me, this takes thousands of hours of our staff time and a lot of months of gathering data. We've recently put in place a state policy database because what we're trying to do now is make it fair for the states to report themselves what they're doing, as opposed to waiting for us to kind of come and dig it out and in many cases miss really important pieces. We are now encouraging people to report on a daily basis, really anything that is happening in the state that's new and exciting and innovative, and teach other states what that is and inform the larger base. So we did put that out there yesterday, and US EPA and DOE are the major funders for this study. So as a matter of fact, this is also the basis of our choice of choosing a state like South Carolina. We look for those states that are not really at sort of the bottom of the heap. We're not looking at the states at the top of the heap, the Californias and the Vermonts and some other states like that have been doing this for a lot of years. And they don't need our help. Some other states that really aren't even thinking about this don't want our help. But South Carolina is waking up, and we can see it from our scorecard. And so I think that's what's exciting about the opportunity to work as we're doing now, is to leave some sort of way to say, here's a path, not the path or the only path, but a path forward. So we released the scorecard yesterday, and as it turns out, South Carolina is 37th out of the total, really 51. It includes the District of Columbia as well. And 37th is not bad. It's not good, it's sort of in the middle. And so the opportunity here really is, what can South Carolina do next in terms of capturing the energy efficiency resource that we know is out there? And briefly, the project approach that we use is to, what we've done, and Senator Campbell here knows exactly this, we've hit him up a couple of times, we really do a major stakeholder process. We go and we don't gather many stakeholder processes. You know, you'll see that people gather everybody in one room and nobody wants to talk. And so we look at this as really an opportunity for us to go one-on-one. It takes a hell of a lot more time. It takes a lot more resource. But in the end, you get a better outcome. You know, we hear from people what they really think, what their fears or their concerns, what their hopes are, and we kind of mush it all together at the end and say, what is it then? And the other parallel piece that's happening at the same time is we're talking to folks and gathering data. We have to gather a lot of data, as you might imagine, and in this case, the majority of the utilities here in the state of South Carolina were actually very helpful. We got a lot of data specific to South Carolina. That isn't always true. In Virginia, for example, we really had to, there were rate cases going on and all sorts of things that kept information from really being free-flowing. We had to then gather it from a regional perspective and boil it down to a state. In South Carolina, it's better data is what I'm trying to say. So we've got the kind of stakeholder process, we've got the data gathering, and then we sort of say, all right, we've got a menu of different recommendations that we can say, hey, here are some recommendations that we have historically found have been valuable in a large number of states, or a large number of states are doing it. But South Carolina is different than any other state. Every state is different. We can't treat South Carolina like we do any other state. So we have to sort of say, what recommendations do we think that is politically viable? What can be done here in the state of South Carolina? Not always totally true, but at least we try that exercise of trying to hone into South Carolina specific recommendations. Then we do the analysis after and we are now in the process of doing this. We've actually got a draft report out. There are a lot of folks, maybe even in this audience, who are reviewing our draft report. And so we do the report release, and we hire a local media firm. We make sure we have somebody who's local here, who knows what kind of the timing and such is good for us, where is the best place to release this report and do that part of it. And then finally, we have a year's worth of money. And to be honest with you, we are working with states now that are well beyond that year. We have a year's worth of money and support to stay in the state, not drop the report, but say, you need further analysis. What do you think about this? Well, maybe try that. Well, we can do a little additional analysis. So kind of moving into what the report itself can produce or will produce is, it's important to note that we can't capture all of the cost-effective energy efficiency that exists in this state. We can only capture in our analysis what we do. We have a set of recommendations. Those recommendations are fairly specific. I'll show you a list in a few minutes. But we take our analysis and we look at that policy achievable resource. That green circle there is really yellow-green. That's the part that we are going to show you the numbers for, if you will. There's still more efficiency out there, but it just won't be altogether captured in our report. So when we did Virginia, we looked at Virginia, we included some of these policies, what we call the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard. The Energy Efficiency Resource Standard, or EERS, as wonks among us like to call it with an acronym, is essentially what an RPS is. And so what the renewable standard is what an efficiency standard is. They're two separate things, but they also are very complementary to one another at the same time. We like to look at manufacturing in states. We have talked extensively with folks about what manufacturing is doing. Clearly the state has issues with trying to attract new jobs, trying to retain and keep jobs. It's very important that we look to help the manufacturing sector. And we have information from a federal or national level that there's a lot of programs out there, some money out there. So in our report, we actually sort of look to that resource and say, here's what we think the state of South Carolina could perhaps capture in addition to. Combined heat and power kind of goes into that same category. It's really just recycling waste heat. This is more specific to industrial and manufacturing, but it's moving into the commercial building sector with hospitals and schools, and maybe even Francis Marion University's considered this at one point in time, but that's another big piece. Codes and standards, not always a great, but codes and standards really gets at a lot of efficiency very fast. And especially if you can do it with an enforcement sort of aspect to it that is actually happening. Public education goes without saying, that's clear. We do a full demand response component or module to the report as we release that too, because though demand response isn't energy efficiency per se, it is something where you basically take those expensive peaks, if you will, flatten them out, and that saves money for everybody. So when we did the Virginia study, this is essentially the result. We basically found with some of those particular recommendations, and some others as well, that you're looking at a potential of a 19% savings on demand growth. That's a fairly dramatic difference if you look at it from a resource perspective. That is something that can really begin to get at energy costs in the state. And I know energy costs are important. Keeping energy cheap is important. That's for lots of different reasons. But I think importantly is to do it, again, with that 2.5 cent resource as opposed to first, before you look to build new infrastructure. Potential impacts for implementation of these policies in Virginia we found to be about a 26 billion cumulative gross consumer savings on electric bills by 2025. Business as usual would have been, the savings was on 220 billion in electric bills with business as usual. 11 billion cumulative savings, efficiency savings, investments through 2025. So the investment is $11 billion to get a total of a $15 billion difference, net difference. So you're looking at a pretty big resource. In terms of jobs, we're looking at the potential by 2015 of 675 jobs, but that jumps to 9,820 jobs by, and again, I think the point of this is, in large part, is not how big or small the numbers are, but that they're positive. You look to see that this is a positive and not a negative. Everyone talks about efficiency costing, or this sort of process or program costing. But this proves, without a doubt, and we keep our numbers pretty conservative, to be honest with you. We don't try to overplay it or we lose our credibility factor. The wages go 63, and this is in millions, of course, 63 million, and in 2025, you can see the numbers here. The gross state product is also a positive. So efficiency in the Southeast, really looking at, and I'm talking about the Southeast region, the southern states, is adding, the difference here, I think, is what I'm trying to say with this slide, is that we're looking at energy efficiency in the state of South Carolina, and largely electric energy efficiency. But this year, this particular study, we've now added energy efficiency related to water. It's the first time we've ever done this. The study we've started in kind of in fits and starts in North Carolina. It's going to include water energy efficiency, but also transportation, something we've never done either. We're trying to add a little more depth and a little more complexity each state that we do this. So South Carolina is going to benefit by a fairly robust new aspect to our program, which is going to look at what kind of savings can be gained on the water side of the world in this. And I know water is a big issue here, but we're not really talking about, we're trying to stay away from that. We're not the experts in water and its use, but we're very much an expert in the energy efficiency, which, by the way, we're now discovering as we're going through this process also saves water. So, acknowledging in this part of the country that there's a heavy dependence on coal-fired generation. That could have some serious ramifications as we go forward into the brave new world of cap and trade. And that's something that I think that is something particular to this part of the country, particularly in South Carolina. And we will be taking a sensitivity factor, if you will, in the whole thing. We're not saying don't build coal. We're not saying don't build nuclear. Just again, as I reiterate over and over, do the efficiency first. And so the climate legislation becomes a reality. Energy efficiency is going to be the cheapest and quickest solution to the situation, as well as your best resource. And it's been proving not only to be the low-hanging fruit, it keeps growing back. The thing is that you talk about the low-hanging fruit, but the beauty of it is this stuff keeps growing back. We also, as I mentioned earlier in our data gathering, do a reference case as what is the potential growth in the state in terms of energy demand. And we have, as you see in front of you here, a definite uptick of growth. And we broke it out by residential, commercial, and industrial. And you can see the lines are but there's these are big kilowatt hours. Gigawatt, megawatt hours, these are big numbers. Even though they don't look big in the lines, they are big in terms of the amount of electricity that's actually in demand, to be in demand. So I'm going to go through as quickly as possible, but I want you to see these are the actual recommendations we're making in our study on South Carolina. These are the ones we'll actually, in most cases, be part of the analysis. The Advanced Energy Efficiency Buildings Initiative, we're looking at what is that whole building system, where you're thinking about a building not by its air conditioning or its heating system, or you're looking at kind of a whole systems thinking within the building's technology. And what could that look like if you really started looking at a more holistic approach with buildings, not only building them, but retrofitting them. Building energy codes and actual enforcement, I've mentioned that already. Looking at appliance and equipment standards. In some part, this is being taken care of, as they say, at the federal level. We will have more significant appliance standards at the federal level. We do not account for that in this study. We look at the state of South Carolina enhancing that aspect of it. So we have never done really a real focus on low-income efficiency programs. We figure that's a very important aspect of what South Carolina faces. It's a big issue. We are looking at manufactured housing much more significantly here than we have in other states. We're looking at, as I mentioned earlier, the manufacturing industrial initiative. We talk to a lot of people. We say, where are the connections, if you will, that can be made that makes the resource that you already have, the technical colleges, the universities, the whole sort of system. We've looked at that fairly well, and we're saying, if you put all that together, here's what it might look like. I've mentioned combined heat and power. I've also mentioned the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard, but I haven't shown you that there are 20 other states that are already doing that. There are 20 other states that already have an Energy Efficiency Resource Standard in place. This is not new stuff. We also have states that are putting them in place. We have pending. So we're going to look at maybe 23 to 24 states in the next year that will be doing this. There's also a federal standard in play right now. And there's the Renewable standard in play federally. There's an energy efficiency legislation and bills in play. And how those all began to play together is something to keep your eye on. But again, it's an opportunity. Even if nothing happens at the federal level, the states are the living laboratories. The states are proving this can work. It does work. So this is the last of this gets into the water and water recommendations. Municipal water we're looking at. How is that's really one of the biggest captures for a municipality in terms of actual cost. And that's where I think you've got some real strong resources out there that other cities are finding and using and saving huge amounts of money. There's some great examples of this out and we'll try to bring some of those to bear. We are looking also at rural and agricultural initiatives specific to South Carolina. We know that's an area where you have a lot of need, I think, and a lot of opportunity. The water and electricity attribution issues, you know, the amount of water it takes to actually run some of this equipment, run some of these power plants and such, that's an aspect that rarely gets accounted for, and it's important for people to understand exactly what are the water issues and the water uses, especially around, again, energy, it exists in most states. We always like to do the lead by example because many states are doing their own municipal and government buildings, especially in this age of stimulus money and lots of places to put money very quickly. The municipal side of it and the lead by example side of it is one place where states can usually show a lot of leadership early on. The latter three that I have here, the workforce, we consider an underlying and necessary piece for every study we do, because without the workforce you don't have any of the rest of it. And as I mentioned earlier, the behavioral initiative, we're looking at what some companies out there are doing right now to try to impact from a utility bill perspective, what is it that you can see about your own energy use that can be made visible, and with recommendations about what individuals can do to, in a behavioral sense, change some of the way that they basically operate their houses and cars and the rest of it, and look for efficiencies there. And I mentioned the demand response already. So, efficiency, and again, gets back to why we chose South Carolina. We've seen leadership stepping forward. We've seen leadership in many levels stepping forward, and we really think that South Carolina is looking for some answers, and that's why we feel right now this is the best time to hopefully give you at least some options of what those answers might be. The resource efficiency is the cheapest, fastest, we like to call it the first fuel. The first fuel is what you want to be thinking about. And to be honest with you, there's a double-edged sword here. Because the Southeast is somewhat behind some of the other regions of the country, you've got the lowest hanging fruit. You've got the best resource possibility right now to really capture some of this stuff. And I do think South Carolina is poised to move to the next level. So the next steps, and this is about my last slide, is the report is out for review, as I mentioned, with 40 or 50 stakeholders. Many of them we talked to one-on-one. We'll conclude the draft review process and start to finalize the report by October 30th. We'll have it finalized by the 6th or so, and then we'll look at rolling that out with a local media firm, Gillespie Agency, and Nola, Donna, in the audience. They will help us, and they have helped us with a venue in Charleston on the 11th of November, and then Columbia on the 12th of November, so you can look for hopefully some access to the full report. We'd love for people to dig into it and look through it. Give us your comments back if you wouldn't mind. Again, we have a year's worth of opportunity at least to further dig into this and see what we can make happen. That's the technical assistance offered later on. So that's the end of my slides, and I think my task right now then would be to invite, I think, the other panel members up. Somebody's keeping track of me if I'm not doing it just right. So what I'll do is and I've got bios for everybody, and I hope folks will be not too upset if I don't read all of them or acknowledge all of the information in them. I think getting to both your comments and your discussion plus the audience questions is the most important thing. So I'm going to start with Paul Campbell. Senator Campbell was elected to the U.S. South Carolina Senate. South Carolina Senate in 2007. It represents District 44, Berkeley County. He has served in numerous business, civic, and professional and government positions, two of which I think are significant as chair of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce and the South Carolina Public Service Authority, giving you great authority in all of this area. Senator Campbell serves in many legislative committees, a number of them. He tells me he's most proud of his graduation from Clemson University with a BS degree in chemical engineering. He also attended Jackson State University and earned an MBA degree. And you came here in 1980?
Actually,
in Berkeley County.
1978.
Okay. So, thank you for being here. And Mike Cowick, thank you. He's a native of Columbia, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Electric Co-ops of South Carolina. He served as Director of Research and Attorney for the South Carolina Senate Judiciary Committee for 21 years prior to joining the South Carolina Co-ops in 2005. Mr. Cowick has joined the electric co-ops at a time of unprecedented shift in the industry's history. I do believe that's true. On the federal level, he's led an effort to support the carbon allowance of cap and trade program and give support to the co-ops to transition to a carbon-constrained economy through self-determined strategies. Mr. Cowick served as Chief Counsel to the South Carolina Judicial Merit Selection Commission. Is this a test of my... and the State Regulation of Public Utilities Review Committee. Thank you for being here. Ashley Lancaster, the shortest bio on this list, by the way, but not the least. Is currently the Deputy Director of the South Carolina Energy Office, and prior to this position, she served as Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, the State Office of Victim Assistance, a graduate of the University of South Carolina with a master's degree in political science. She also serves on the governor's as the governor's appointee to the Southern States Energy Board. And I, for one, know her. She's been very helpful in this report and the work we've been doing. Thank you. And the mayor on the end, Mayor Wakila, thank you. Was elected mayor of the city of Florence in 2008, sworn in 2008, graduated from Clemson University, so we have 2 Clemson grads on the panel.
2 Carolina as well.
I hedged that right. So, he graduated with a political science degree in 1996. He graduated in 2000 from George Washington University Law School with a Juris Doctorate degree, and he has practiced law with the Wakila law firm here in Florence, I would imagine. He ran his campaign. This is an important aspect in the last part of it. The mayor ran his campaign and was aimed at bringing change by unifying the city of Florence. Heading his agenda are public safety issues, downtown development, and rehabilitation efforts. It is the mayor's hope that these efforts will bring about a new, more unified and prosperous city. Thank you. So it's my good fortune now to ask each one of you, if you wouldn't mind, given the presentation I've given on the importance of energy efficiency, do you all have either comments on my presentation or some comments independent of that you'd like to present, 2 or 3 minutes each, if you'd like to start?
Be happy to start. You know, the answer to our energy issues in the United States, and especially South Carolina, is not one thing. It's a whole plethora of things. It's all the above. You know, basically efficiency and conservation is one of the things that we can do, and that gives us the biggest bang for our buck, and that's something all of us should be doing every day. You know, we need to look at solar, but solar is probably not going to be practical except maybe in home for hot water or something like that, and even then it may not be that cost effective. We need to look at biomass, because biomass is something we can do right now, and Clemson University is working on some of this stuff. You can actually pelletize the biomass product and actually feed it on the belt that feeds coal into the coal plant. So it's something you can use without a lot of technology. We need to look at wind, because wind is something that does exist offshore between Georgetown, Winyah Bay, and North Myrtle Beach. There's enough wind, Class 5 wind, that we can generate electricity from wind. But also wind offers us another opportunity, because basically we have GE that makes turbines in Greenville. We have Bosch and Timken that makes bearings. We have other people that make parts for the wind manufacturing. South Carolina could actually become the wind turbine manufacturer for North America, and I would like to see that, because that relates to thousands of jobs. So we can actually generate electricity and we can generate jobs with wind. So that's something that we really need to do. You know, we can't rule out coal. Coal is something that we got to have in South Carolina. You know, a significant part of our power is going to come from coal for the foreseeable future, because we have to have power to run our commerce and our industry. And we've got to have nuclear. You know, basically Santee Cooper made the right decision. Mike and the co-ops worked with Duke so that they could supply 1,000 megawatts to the upstate cooperatives. That made the need for Santee Cooper to build a coal plant unnecessary. That was a good decision for Santee Cooper and for the cooperatives. But by the same token, somewhere down the road, we've got to have energy for commerce, for residential, for tourism. We've got to have energy in South Carolina. That's going to come from nuclear power. You know, Santee Cooper and SCAN are looking at putting 2 reactors north of Columbia at Jenkinsville, and Duke's looking at sometime around 2020 of putting a couple of reactors in Lee County up in Gaffney. We've got to have power in South Carolina. So we've got to have all the above to generate electricity, to supply our commerce, to supply needs for our citizens. You know, I chaired the Offshore Natural Gas Study Committee, and really what I would like to see is somewhere down the line, and Hamilton Davis is out there from the Coastal Conservation League, and he and I have served both on the Wind Study Committee and also on the Offshore Natural Gas Committee. And I want to see us drill offshore natural gas if it's there. I want to see us stay in the Minerals Management Service, which is part of the U.S. Department of Interior's plan, so that we would begin exploration or leasing sometime around 2014 or 15 to see if there is indeed enough natural gas offshore. It doesn't look like there's recoverable commercial oil, but it does look like there could be trillions of cubic feet of natural gas. I would like to see us bring that in because, again, that's part of our energy solution. You know, we talked about and we heard a little bit about the global warming or the cap and trade. Folks, I've got a problem with cap and trade. I'll be honest with you because, you know, in the United States, this could really impact our cost of energy and force jobs offshore North America. To give you some little tidbits, for every $1,000 of gross domestic product, the Chinese puts out 5 times more greenhouse gases than the United States. India puts out 3.5 times more greenhouse gases than the United States. Brazil puts out 3 times more greenhouse gases than the United States. For every job we run out of the United States into one of these countries, we actually make global warming worse. So we've got to be very, very careful how we do cap and trade, because if it costs us jobs, then we've made a big mistake. If it costs us jobs, we've made a big mistake. So again, we've got to be careful how we do our energy, both in the state and from the federal government. You know, basically we need jobs in South Carolina. We're sitting at 11.6% unemployment. I'm going to do everything I can in the South Carolina Senate. I'm going to do everything I can on economic development to bring jobs to the state. I certainly don't want to see us losing jobs in this state. You know, we're working on, in the General Assembly, we're working on building codes. We're working on conservation methods. We want to bring the Energy Star tax credit so that if someone wants to replace their appliances, their heating and air conditioning unit, to reduce the energy used in their particular residential applications or in their commercial applications, we want to make that easier for those folks to do that. There's a lot of things that we've got going on, folks, in South Carolina. Energy is a big necessary ingredient for the success of the state. So we've got to do everything we can to make sure in the future we have enough energy for our commerce, for our industries, for our tourism, for our residential citizens. But it's all the above. It's a lot of solutions. There's no magic bullet. The cheapest and most effective way to do that is energy efficiency, energy conservation, and that's something we need to be hitting at very, very hard. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Campbell.
I'd never talked to Suzanne before last week, and we had a fairly brief conversation, but we were both kind of breathless during it because we were feeding off each other's enthusiasm for energy efficiency. I'd like to note that there are 20 electric cooperatives across the state. We serve 1.5 million consumers. Where you sit right now is kind of PD territory. Brian Kelly, Tom Conard are here tonight. They're big supporters of Francis Marion University. They support a scholarship program here. They support the efforts of this university to serve this community. And I guess that's where I'd like to start as it relates to co-ops generally. We're part of those communities. We don't generate electricity, we sell electricity. We buy it from someone. So to the extent we make choices, we don't have any type of generation strategy to defend. We've got to defend that we are reaching out to our consumers and they're happy. They're happy from a cost standpoint, they're happy from an environmental standpoint. Thought about all the things I could say tonight. I could talk about $5,000 per kW nuclear and that being expensive when what you've got right now, generally built in the state, whether you're Duke, SCANA, or Progress, or Santee Cooper, is somewhere between $600 and $700. So for every kW you replace with 5,000 going from 600 or 700, it's going to be a real sticker shock to the consumer. Energy efficiency gets to be vital in that standpoint, where we can slow down. I noticed there was a press release today that there was some concern about the AP design, the Westinghouse design on nuclear, and there's some issues up with that. I think if we can slow ourselves down a little bit, we can make smarter choices in how we invest. And I also want to stress one thing. I do a lot of research, and sometimes my best research is done with my children. There's a book called Amelia Bedelia. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and she loves for me to read to her at night. In this book, I can remember I was read when I was a child. Amelia Bedelia, when she becomes the maid for the family, they leave her a list and they tell her to do exactly what's on the list. And Amelia Padilla, being, I don't want to say a little bit slow, but she doesn't quite understand Mrs. Rogers' language about how to do things. So when she dusts the furniture, she really takes the dusting powder and dusts the furniture. I hope that when we work this plan that we're talking about, that we don't make a list, that we don't say this is a prescriptive analysis of what you need to do in every situation. Because what co-ops will need to do will be so different than what Duke Energy needs to do. It will be so different than what a co-op in California would do. South Carolina co-ops are already committed before this report comes out that we're going to weatherize and make energy efficient 150,000 homes over the next 10-year period. We've got to find ways to do that that fits within our economic model, Senator, because we're not Duke Energy with Jim Rogers and relying on shareholder return to drive that. We've got to find partnerships, and I think I'm very proud, I guess, of anything we've done over the last year. Or we've reached out to the League of Conservation Voters, we've reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, we reached out to other utilities. We want to find strategic alliances that when we look at that list, we can talk openly and frankly and honestly that here's what will work for us, and please take us at our word that if you'll let us work our own self-design plan, we'll bring you good results. Thank y'all for having me tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, that's some important points that are made, too. Ashley?
Okay. Is this on? Do I have to?
I think it's on.
Okay, wonderful. Y'all can hear me then. I just would start off by saying thank you to Suzanne for the study that you all have done. I think this is going to be a great resource for South Carolina, and thank you for having me here tonight. Just want to echo a little bit of a few of the comments that were made here. I certainly agree with Senator Campbell that there are many solutions that we have to look toward in order to meet our energy needs for the future. However, I also tend to agree with Suzanne that energy efficiency is really the lowest hanging fruit, and certainly the way that we need to step forward first in order to really assess our energy needs and be able to keep dollars here in South Carolina. We know that energy efficiency is good for our environment. We know it reduces carbon emissions. We know it reduces mercury and other harmful things in our atmosphere. But we also need to focus on the fact that energy efficiency is good for our economy. Energy efficiency is the way that we can keep dollars here in South Carolina in the pockets of our residents, in the pockets of our businesses, of our commercial industry. South Carolina uses about $20 billion per year in energy resources, and we don't produce any coal, any oil, any natural gas. But we can produce energy efficiency. We can do that right here, and we can make those dollars stay right here in South Carolina. The Energy Office, which is who I'm here representing tonight, is committed to those types of energy efficiency initiatives. And over the past 10 years, through grants and loans and projects that we've tried to support out in the community, we have actually saved over $300 million for the people of South Carolina. And that's just one example of what energy efficiency measures can do. We have a very unique opportunity with the stimulus monies that have come down through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, particularly for these types of initiatives. In the Energy Office, we have just alone, we have over $45 million for public building retrofits. Those dollars will go to make our tax base even lower for the folks that live here in South Carolina, because we will be able to save money on the energy that folks use right here at Francis Marion, for example, who has an allocation to do building retrofits. The city of Florence, the city of Marion or the county of Florence, who are receiving monies through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, will have the opportunity to take those dollars and affect real change in energy use right here, even in this very room that you're sitting in. And that's the type of change that we need to see in order to continue to move forward and be able to meet our resources. We may have to continue to build generation. That's certainly something that we have to consider. We don't want our folks with blackouts and having to deal with those types of issues. But there are ways to look at our energy problems and our energy needs and make a difference through energy efficiency that can really help prevent us from doing those types of things that we don't need to do, that are more harmful on the environment and more harmful on our economy, as long as we focus on these types of initiatives. So thank you again for having me here.
Couldn't have said it any better. Thank you. Mayor?
Thank you. You know, from the political perspective, from my perspective, I come from a very impoverished part of the state. And we find often that we're compelled to make decisions between pollution or poverty. And I think what this seminar exemplifies is that that's really a false dichotomy. You don't have to make those necessarily choices between pollution and poverty. You can have both prosperity and a clean environment. I want to applaud Mike and Duke Power and Santee Cooper on the choice they made with the coal-fired power plant. I think it was the right choice, and I think it was a more efficient choice, and I think it saved us a lot of pollution that was unnecessary. I'd also like to take this opportunity to applaud Johnson Controls, who's coming to Florence County, that I'm very proud of. They have taken a very open and a very energy efficient perspective. And they're doing a recycling facility, and I think they're an example of a industry that I believe will be very cooperative in protecting the environment while bringing jobs to Florence County and the city of Florence. From the city's main perspective, the biggest thing I think that we can do for energy efficiency, in addition to the things we can do with our own buildings and our own operations, are how we design our infrastructure and how, when we are moving forward with infrastructure, we focus on that idea of efficiency. One, I think the best example, in fact, and I'm glad you mentioned it today, is a new wastewater treatment plant that we're constructing for the city of Florence that also serves the county of Florence. It's a $120 million project, and we're focusing in the design and construction of that project. And I want to thank my predecessor for his focus on designing that facility to catch methane gas and to recycle and to use recapturing techniques in order to be more energy efficient and provide the water and sewer needs of the city of Florence in a more efficient way, in a more productive way. Also, I'd like to conclude with the importance, I think, as you've pointed out in your presentation, of transportation. And as we look at infrastructure and the changes in infrastructure and the future of the city and the county and the state, how we focus on changes in transportation infrastructure to concentrate on more efficient models. Of course, there's very important federal legislation coming down. Cap and trade is a great example of that. But I also like to point to the transportation bill that's coming out and the dollars that expect to be expended on high-speed rail and other more mass transit models to avoid less efficient and more polluting models of transportation that we've relied on so long in South Carolina.
Very good. Covered a lot of territory there with those four folks. It's my job to sort of come up with some questions, and they've just about answered all the questions I was going to actually present here. But maybe I could add sort of one that's a little more challenging. And I talked about the scorecard and the fact that South Carolina is 37th. Now the scorecard is a moving target. I'll give you an example. Delaware moved from 32nd to 20th. They did that through some certain specific measures. Other states are continuing to always improve. The process here is constant improvement. That's not you can't stand still and say, this is it, we're done. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists with just a little bit of time to give me your one thought of what might bring South Carolina higher in that score next year.
The first thing I would bring up would be behavior. We've got to change behavior in South Carolina, the way we use energy in our homes and our automobiles, and the way we employ the things that really turn the lights on and drive our industry and our jobs. We've got to educate our folks. We've got to provide the resources that folks that want to improve the insulation in the house, like Ashley was talking about, folks that want to replace appliances so they're more energy efficient, those that will change the lighting in their house. We've got to change behavior of South Carolinians. This will lead to the biggest gain that we can possibly have on trying to drive the cost of our energy down and keep our energy costs where it needs to be. So we've got to do something to educate our people so they understand what the true cost of energy really is and what they can do personally in their own private lives.
Just from my background, I'm often disappointed when public policy development becomes a contact sport. In some degree, it's like that in the area of environment and utility work. And I would caution everybody that until the Constitution of 1895 is amended, the General Assembly is going to be the primary developer of public policy in this state. And it's unfair to expect 170 people to react to people in a contact sport. We've got to take rational solutions, take it from strategic alliances and put it forward before them. I will say that I believe that residential energy efficiency weatherization is the major way to move the state forward. Our own efforts, we believe that we can achieve a 20% savings in residential energy use through our 150,000 home program and with some other things we're doing with CFLs and other. I've enjoyed talking about this with people that are very diverse in backgrounds this year. I hope that we can continue that dialogue, take it to the General Assembly, take it in a way, again, where they can not have to worry about who's telling the truth or who's right.
I think Senator Campbell hits it right on the nose when he talks about behavior, and I think we need to focus on that. We need to let folks realize the economic benefits of changing their behavior as well, and take it a little bit further than just recognizing that we can have an impact on our carbon mitigation, but to let them realize that that's money back in their pockets. We need to give you an example. We have, through the Stimulus Act, we have some funds that will be coming down for an appliance rebate program, and these monies are designed to encourage folks to purchase Energy Star appliances, and it really allows for an incentive that will get people to start thinking differently about the types of use that they have for energy in their homes. And so we do need to, and that's just one way that we can begin to educate folks, as they begin to see the real savings on their bill from replacing that refrigerator and having their old one hauled away and recycled. Then they start to say, well, hey, maybe energy efficiency is really the way to go, because I can now see that put a couple more dollars back into my pocket. I think we need to focus on our building codes. Our building codes have been a big issue, and we had a great success last session where we were able to pass some legislation that brought our building codes up to the 2009 standard for the International Energy Efficiency Energy Conservation Code. And we need to continue that work. We need to make sure that we're at the forefront of that. We need to move forward and adopt the 2012 code. I think that will make a big difference. And we also need to have additional training on building code enforcement. Our office is working on putting together some training programs to provide precisely that through the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, and we want to through the Building Code Council. We think that's very important. It's one thing to pass building code legislation. It's quite another to make sure that it's implemented when it goes down to the residential or the commercial level, and we need to make sure that that continues to move forward. So I think that those are some of our biggest opportunities.
I think behavior is quite right. I think it also goes to policymaker behavior, though, and it's kind of counterintuitive for a policymaker to expend the upfront dollars that you have to expend to build a building more efficiently or design infrastructure more efficiently. We don't get elected by telling people what we're going to do for them in 5 years. And it requires a change in the way policymakers think to insist on that more efficient infrastructure as we build it. And I think that's just going to take a shift in the way we think.
Thank you very much. I'm going to kind of reverse the question a little bit and ask you if you see any particular barriers or problems with implementing new and more aggressive energy efficiency.
One of the barriers, the folks that need energy efficiency in their homes more than anyone else are the folks at the poverty level. Those are the folks that are hardest to touch. Those are the folks we need to reach out and make sure that those are the people that, in a small house at 1,200 square feet, they're paying $300 or $400 a month for electricity in the summertime to try to cool their home, or paying $300 or $400 to heat it in the wintertime. Those are the folks who can least afford it. That's the barrier we've got to reach out. It's not the folks in this room. It's the folks out there that don't know to come to this room. It's the folks that y'all can touch about your everyday lives, whether it's in a social setting, whether it's at church, whether it's in a community setting. That's the barrier we've got to reach out. We've got to touch those folks and make them aware of the resources that are available to them. The ability to insulate their homes, to weatherize their homes through the monies that are available. They have to know they're there, and they have to come and get it. And it's up to us in this room, all of us, to make sure that they have that information.
Thank you. Very good.
You're right about manufactured housing in particular. We have folks that pay $700 in the month of January because they have strip resistance heating. I look at what California's done to be so successful to promote renewables. One way they've done that, they've priced electricity above 600 kWh per month at a rate right over the cost of producing it by solar. I don't know that we can afford to charge 37.5 cents per kWh. In South Carolina, we're going to take that person whose power bill is $700 in January, and we're going to make it where it's like $2,800. So we've got to find ways to provide capital. Folks, we have 24% of our folks in co-op homes live in manufactured housing. Their level of functional illiteracy is the 4th highest in the country. We've got barriers that relate to education, but they just don't have the money to invest $5,000 in rehabbing their home by putting a new heat pump in. We've got to decide that if dollars are available, particularly if carbon, and I do think a carbon cap and trade will come, Senator, I think we've got to make sure that we insist out of our political leaders in Washington that those dollars be spent on a solution to carbon. And the best way to do that is through energy efficiency in South Carolina, and expect that if those dollars go up to Washington, at least under Waxman-Markey passed by the House, In 2012, the lowest year, it will be $150 million just out of South Carolina co-op households. If we could have half of that, $75 million, we could do 15,000 homes in South Carolina, and it wouldn't even be loans, it would just be grants. We need those monies here for solutions. So I think capital and education are both important.
I think both Mike and Senator Campbell are correct in that we do have to look at our low-income population. They're one of our highest energy users in the state, and that's a place that we can really affect change, and it's not a place that these folks can affect change on their own. Mike also mentioned our manufactured housing issue, and we have a large number of manufactured homes in South Carolina, and these homes are generally with the low-income population, and they are not energy efficient. And weatherization is one of the best ways that we can address those if we don't have the ability to just basically replace them, which would be the ultimate goal. There's a lot of money coming into South Carolina right now for the Weatherization Assistance Program. I think it's $58 million over the next 3 years to do precisely these types of programs. The co-ops and other utilities have put together some sort of a commitment to also providing weatherization services and other types of energy efficient services. I think the biggest issue, though, is just a simple resistance to change. People are afraid. People are always afraid when they have to look at something new, and we see that in all aspects of our life. And part of that comes, part of being willing to change is being knowledgeable about what the impact of that change will be, and that comes from education. And we go back again to this issue of having so many low-income residents in South Carolina and a low education level. If we can work to bring that up, I think we'll have a real possibility of making folks understand the importance of making this type of change.
Yeah, I think that's quite right. I really don't have much to add to that because I think the senator hit it on the head. The biggest obstacle I think we have is poverty. It's inefficient the way folks have to live in impoverished settings. I think in the city of Florence, we've got 2,500 buildings that are just simply inhabitable. And there are people living in many of those buildings. They don't, much less have proper weatherization. They don't have proper heating facilities. They don't have proper cooling facilities, and they're using space heaters, and they're using, that sort of thing, propane heaters. And so I think that has to be attacked head on, and education is certainly a way to do that. I think also industry is a key source on how to do that, because many of those people do have jobs and they just live at substandard conditions, and the one way to get to them is through their employers, who can say, listen, we insist that you do this, and we're going to help you find a way to do it.
Thank you. That's a lot of good information. And what I think we want to do now is to open it up to the audience and to see if you have specific questions you want to ask. And I'd really like to give the panel one last shot at sort of summation at the end. So a few more comments from each one, but I'd like to hear from folks in the audience. Do you have any questions? Back there. If you'd come over to the mic here and introduce yourself. We're being recorded at this point in time. So we need to have your introduction and your question on the mic. Maybe folks would like to... Is this mic
Yeah, it is. Looks like it's wireless.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Carr. I wondered what kind of standards there are for manufactured housing for energy efficiency, insulation, that sort of thing in the state, and if any improvements are under consideration.
There are changes in financial incentives that were passed by our General Assembly just a year and a half, 2 years ago, that reward those people with a fuller measure of a tax credit or not paying taxes in the case of sales tax if they'll make a choice on Energy Star. Warren Buffett's a smart fellow. He's taken Clayton Manufactured Homes, and they more or less are committed to an Energy Star type approach. I think you're going to find that the standards are there for new manufactured homes that are producing great results. The problem we have is we've got 35% of the co-op households that live in a manufactured home, their home was manufactured before 1990, 54% before 1995. Those things have been moved innumerable times. They're moved by unlicensed people. And when they get there, we actually do thermal imaging, and you can see where the two pieces are not joined together. So what we need to do in this state next year, Senator, is we need to license people that site mobile homes and move them. We need to make it where that somebody has to actually be trained in order to do that.
I agree with Mike. The problem is not the new homes. The new homes are meeting standards. It's the older homes, and we have a significant part of our population that lives in older mobile homes in this state who can least afford cost of energy.
That's absolutely correct, and in fact, the Energy Office actually provides the certification labels for these new Energy Star manufactured homes through our office, and that is really not the issue. It is, in fact, these homes that are already out there that were not built up to these standards that we need to be worried about. So.
Any other questions in the audience? Yes, sir. You wait for the mic just one second.
Excuse me.
Senator Campbell, I'm Mike King, a local fellow. Considering energy efficiency standards work, would you support energy efficient legislation in the Statehouse?
Absolutely. You know, what we're trying to do is some of the legislation we've looked at is what we can do with government buildings, because there's just a slew of government buildings, whether they be on universities like Francis Marion or whether they be in Columbia. You know, what can we do on, again, solar is not going to be a big answer for South Carolina because of humidity and efficiency. It's good for West Texas, it's good for Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California. But what can we do on the flat roof buildings we have? Maybe we can do something with some solar there that would bring some energy efficiencies to us. But I would totally, completely support on government buildings to try to make them more energy efficient.
Thanks. I'm Lisa Pike. I was just wondering about any sort of programs to encourage renewable energies like net metering.
We do have through the state energy program and the stimulus dollars that came down from the federal government, we have a renewable energy competitive grant program that's currently going on. It's actually the deadline to apply is October 30th. So if you're interested, go onto our website and take a look and see what's out there. But it's for a variety of different renewable type projects to be considered. So that would be one area you might look at.
Well, we do have net metering and net billing in locations in the state, which I think will make a difference. But and then we have, I don't know about Micah, but I think Santee Cooper will give you an interest-free loan if you want to do something at your home. And I think the co-ops do something along that line.
We do. I will caution folks that a lot of the challenges of renewable energy is not necessarily the technology of the energy, it's that it's intermittent. And if we can ever solve the problems of energy storage at a level where it makes it where that wind that's available 30% of the time offshore, we can store it efficiently, the same thing with solar. One thing we're doing with co-ops is we're pushing the idea of old tech as it relates to renewables. Put a water storage tank on the roof, run it through the hot water heater in a passive way to lessen the use of heating. You could pretty much turn your hot water heater off from about the end of March to about the beginning of October and have significant savings, and we're pushing that. Again, I'm not one that wants to push a solar panel that costs $25,000 that's not going to be cost effective. It's kind of like the large screen TVs. I call it vanity generation. Who's got the biggest in the neighborhood? We need to do things that will work for people of all income levels.
Some other questions? Back there.
Yes, I'm Larry Newton. And the question I have for you is two parts. In some parts of the country now, we're seeing where municipal financing districts are starting to take hold. And this is a great way to provide relatively inexpensive loans attached to property taxes for energy efficiency improvements. So two parts of my question is how readily can we implement them here in South Carolina, and how effectively have they worked in other parts of the country? The large number of people who probably would benefit from them would be more maybe your middle class people, because over a 20-year period, many of these energy and efficiency improvements could almost be self-amortizing. So I don't know whether the state legislature needs to be involved. I think Charleston has just recently implemented something like this, and it's being attached to the water bill, so that it stays with the property, may have a 10-year life, and at the end of that it's retired. So I guess that's my question.
Can I take you one step further? Why don't you just do utility on-bill financing and let the lien, I call it green lien, travel with the power meter? And the state of Kansas just implemented this through a system called PAYS, and this is what the co-ops are pursuing, where that way you get to non-owner occupied properties easier. That landowner may not want that lien attached to his property tax bill, but you've got that resident there, that tenant. If it goes from tenant to tenant to tenant with the power bill, it's going to be paid people, in order to accept electricity, are going to have to pay that bill. Let me take it one step further too and say, don't take all the savings out of each month. Let the person that lives there keep part of it. Maybe make a 50-50 split or a 66 to 1/3 split, where if you project the savings, and you can pretty much project it if you look at the differences where folks were to where they're going to be. Let's say it's $100 a month. Let them keep $50 in their pocket as an incentive to do it. Take the other $50, run it over an 8 to 10 year period, and you can pay off an HVAC conversion, particularly if it's a strip heating to heat pump conversion in the state. We want to pursue those types of ideas. They work well for cooperatives. I can't say they work well for every type of utility, but we think that particularly rural folks, when you don't have the benefit of being in a municipality or others, everybody ought to have access to energy efficiency.
It probably has a large extent to do with local legislation versus state legislation. I think that's where you'd be most effective with something like this. As I say, politics is local. The closest you can get to the folks that are paying the bills, I think the better response you're going to get from something dictated by Columbia, back through the counties, back through the cities.
Good evening. My name is Dan Felker. I'm with Green Environment Energy Solutions. I don't really have a question, but I've got kind of a vision that I'd like to challenge everybody with. And it's very broad and far-reaching. I'll say that before I even say it. But have any of you guys, thinking from a state level and even a local level, perhaps the PD or even at the city level, have any of you guys had any discussion, or do you see any type of ideas of perhaps a regional or a state incubator type of setup where you've got a great way, doctors, to pull into the university, the research centers, and departments in local education, and perhaps obviously utilities have to be involved, manufacturing has to be involved, all sectors of, and I know I'm leaving people out, but I'm really thinking of all sectors of the economy, and really try to put together a consortium of cooperation that really pulls from creative ideas, ingenuitive type ideas, and then taking those ideas from the institutions and making them viable, marketable, sustainable products for the market. That's a very broad vision, but has anybody heard of any type of thoughts or any type of processes or directions in that direction?
It's already being done in one instance with the Council of Economic Excellence. I actually am appointed by Senator McConnell to that. We hand out $30 million a year to research institutions for endowed chairs. One of the key sectors identified by that Council of Economic Excellence is energy. In fact, Santee Cooper, I see Jeff Penland here, and the co-ops have committed $5 million to clean energy issues with the University of South Carolina. That originally started as kind of a clean coal project, but it's broadened to the point now where the University of South Carolina is studying what's the best way to weatherize an old manufactured home. And they're giving a prize to their graduate students each year of the most creative strategies to do that. I think you're bringing up an issue of strategic alliance is a little bit different than what research universities do. And I guess that's where I went earlier. We all need to get in a room and talk more and do it in a way that is not always just self-serving.
The South Carolina Energy Department does a good bit of that coordination. And you know, with Ashley and with John in the audience here, you know, that's the people that I think could do the best job of trying to coordinate that type of effort, because it stretches the whole state. But all your research institutions, you know, the University of South Carolina, Clemson, they're all looking at ways, and I'm sure that Dr. Carter here and Francis Marion is looking at ways that they can reach out and pull groups together to cooperate on trying to do energy efficiency. So I really think that that's what you've got to do. I think a lot of it's got to be driven by some of the universities, because that's where your think tanks are, and they're located in the communities, so they can get a quicker touch to the people.
Senator, I might just respond to that if I might. As you know, most of, particularly comprehensive teaching universities, really have worked hard to pioneer business incubators. And certainly the models out there, extending that model to incorporate energy efficiency directions in energy enterprises and operations would be a relatively small step. But I want to go one step just a little further than what we've talked about so far. You know, if we look at the 9 contiguous counties that touch this university, of those 9 counties, 7 of those counties have unemployment rates 15% or higher. 2 of those counties have unemployment rates that are highest in the state, greater than 20%, Marlboro and Marion County. You know, And I want to be careful how I say this, because I want you to understand I'm strongly supportive of the theme that you bring this evening. In fact, the one thing that bothers me about the four of you is that you're not disagreeing with one another. I like panels that get angry with one another. And this panel clearly has a common perspective, and I applaud that perspective. But I've got to tell you something about the PD. And I suspect that the Savannah Valley region isn't much different. They've been prodded, they've been pushed, they've been analyzed, they've been observed. They've been promised things from Washington. They've been promised things from Columbia. And you know, over the decades, the culture and the poverty has remained pretty much the same of what it is today. And now we come, and the theme is, and now on top of everything else, they want to screw with my home. Well, let me say this. There is a wonderful, I think, direction here that's been suggested by the panel, and I want to go back to a comment Mike made to lead off. There are two things in this region that I think are well respected. Three things if you include Francis Marion University, but let's just set that aside. One thing are the churches, okay? And I think you really cannot underestimate the power of churches as change agents in a region like this. You know, so we can talk about the universities, but the churches and other nonprofits across this region can play a very, very powerful role of educating. The other thing, going back, playing off Mike's comment early on, is the co-ops. If you don't live in a co-op area, you don't have an appreciation for the true power that co-ops have in affecting and changing quality of lives and cultures in a community. It's not simply power provision. Mm-hmm. It's economic development recruiting. It's philanthropic support. It's, look, if your Boy Scout troop, you're trying to get to Washington for a parade in a small little rural community and there's no place else to go, you go and park yourself in the office of the co-op exec, and if he can't give you the money, he'll help you find the money. Senator Mike started off by saying, give us greater latitude to work to bring about some of the energy efficiencies. And here my focus is principally on the most impoverished portions of the state, like the PD. My sense is allowing the co-ops to broaden their operation, receive the support to bring in many of the nonprofits and churches across the region to begin the energy efficiency education is the way to go. If you have the bishop of the local AME church, you've taken an enormous step in that direction. Amen. If you brought in the Baptist ministers, an enormous step. That, I think, is clearly the direction that's worth pursuing over the next 4 or 5 years, and giving the latitude to the co-ops to bring that process about.
Thank you, Fred.
Back to you, Senator.
I would certainly applaud that. You know, the biggest obstacle we have right now in South Carolina on trying to do anything is our level of unemployment. It's 11.6% unemployment. We have roughly probably 250 or 60,000 South Carolinians that aren't working. Folks, if you multiply that by 3 people, because there's roughly 3 people per family, you've got almost 1 million South Carolinians that are impacted by unemployment. Unemployed person can't do the things, and unemployed families can't do the things they need to be doing as far as trying to do energy efficiency, as far as trying to do anything else. They're trying to eke out a living every day to put food on the table. We've got to do something about this 11.6% unemployment. We've got to do something in South Carolina to put jobs out there so that we get back down to the more normal levels, the 6% or the 7%. We've got to do something in South Carolina to drive jobs in this state. That will solve a lot of our problems, because that will bring the revenue in that we need to do the things that we're just talking about here tonight.
And Ashley knows made a good start on that this year when she was in the governor's office of economic opportunity, working with the tech system and creating the training workforce to do energy efficiency. I've shared with Jim Clyburn, I've shared with John Spratt and Lindsey Graham. I think the solution to part of our problem is we need to give anybody that's got a pickup truck and 2 friends and they need a job, $5,000 to get a little bit of equipment together to go in the energy auditing business. Then learn how to do a little bit of work with HVAC. Then you're going to see these rural communities working in their own, going to their church, Fred, and talking and say, who needs help? We've got money either from Ashley or money from the co-ops or whatever. Let's go out there and solve some problems. They're going to feel great about their communities. They're going to feel great about themselves. They're going to build some of these rural communities back. And I agree that's where we need to start. If you've never been to the outskirts of Lake City and seen what the challenges are there, you've not lived in South Carolina. You know, earlier I said I was a native of Columbia. I'm actually from Clover. Clover's benefited by having a nuclear plant there, Paul, since 1980. It went from being one of the poorest school districts in the state to being one of the wealthiest. I don't want a nuclear plant in every school district, but I would like to use energy efficiency the same way as the first fuel, and we can really spur some of this on. So Ashley, thank you for what you did with that.
Well, and I would just follow up on that. I think we have a great technical college system here in our state, and the fact that we're able to tap into that, you know, there were monies that came down through the Weatherization Assistance Program that provided training and technical assistance dollars. There are also some funding through the Energy Office for training and technical assistance, and we forged a partnership there to work with the tech schools to provide really what we're calling energy efficiency training collaboratives around the state. And the idea was precisely to address some of the issues that you brought up, Dr. Carter, about the fact that many of our low-income folks in the rural areas do not have the ability to travel for training. They don't have the ability to stay overnight. They don't have childcare. They don't have transportation. And so if we can bring these programs directly to them with the monies that we have available now and train them not only for weatherization or for the types of HERS rating or things like that we're looking at as we have these stimulus monies, we're actually positioning them to have jobs long-term in the green economy. And so we're not just making a difference now. We know the stimulus money is going to run out. The idea is to build a workforce that will be there after the stimulus money's gone, because the fact is that the green economy, I don't think, is going away, despite the fact that the stimulus money may. So thank you for your help with that, Mike.
I think that's right, and I think it goes back to the point that if we don't get to the people that are on 52 between Florence and Charleston, then this whole project is lost. And I think also Dr. Carr's point is well made that probably the best way to get to those people is through the co-ops, because they all deal with the co-ops. And you look at local government, if the local government's looking at doing a bond issuance to fund loans in order to provide for energy upgrades for citizens in its community, it has problems of finding a revenue source to justify that bond rating, and to also how the liens are going to be established and finding the owners, as the Senator has pointed out and as Mike has pointed out. But I think the co-op is a natural source of being able to do that, because they have that revenue source of the bill every month, and they have contact with that particular meter on a consistent basis. So I think that may be an excellent way to find that efficiency and to get to those people who are out of the normal stream.
Thank you. I think you can see you have a lot of talent in this state in terms of understanding some of the real issues and how to get at them. And I just say amen to your comment about the churches and such. We're seeing a lot of activity in other parts of the country specific to that resource. So we have one last question in the audience. John, I think you... Yes, it's fine. Yeah, just...
Hello, my name is Rose Davis, and I'd like to say to the panel, I think I'm a little confused about coal energy. Can you explain to me the difference of coal energy and energy itself, please? Or clean energy?
Coal-based generation, electricity generated by coal. It will be, I predict by 2030 there will be very little coal-based generation in South Carolina, because we don't have acceptable ways of capturing it and sequestering it in the state. The challenge to co-ops, and I think to all of us, are going to be, what do we replace it with? Do we replace it with nuclear that costs 4 or 5 times as much as it does now? Do we slow that transition down by investing in energy efficiency so we can see if other things come along? If we get energy storage, we can make wind work, we can make solar work, but we don't have those capabilities right now. So I think coal in this part of the country, in South Carolina, will be hard to preserve, whereas long-term, whereas in Louisiana, where they may have salt caverns to store carbon emitted that's captured, I don't know that we're going to have those choices here. So I think that we're talking about survival strategies now, about how you transition. St.G. Cooper has been very good at building affordable electricity through coal. They are now at 80% coal. How do we transition that partnership between co-ops and St.G. Cooper? It took us 70 years to build that system. We have 20 years to convert it without killing those people that live outside Lake City, that live in that mobile home, and they're going to be killed if we don't do it the right way.
So then you're not advocating that we continue with coal energy. You're just sharing the difference.
I'm probably in a little bit different situation than the Senator, because when I go to Washington and I listen, I hear that they're talking about investing in carbon capture and sequestration. In order for that to work, you have to have the right geological strata in your area in order to store it. From what I've seen, we just don't have that in South Carolina. You're going to have to pump it or pipe it or whatever to Louisiana or some parts of Florida.
Or offshore.
Offshore. If you could find a way to dump it in the ocean and make a dry side of it, you might be able to do that. But again, if we'll slow this down a little bit with energy efficiency, we don't have to make these choices in the blind right now.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think Mike's optimistic. I think coal's going to be with us for quite some time. And I say that because, the bulk of the energy in South Carolina is not generated by coal. We need to phase it out over some period of time, but we've got to do it in a fashion that we don't kill the jobs in South Carolina and we don't kill the residents in South Carolina with extremely high power cost. And I do think nuclear is going to play a huge part in the future. So Mike and I kind of disagree a little bit on that one, but I see the need to have the two nuclear generators, new reactors at the Jenkinsville plant, and I see Duke needing to build the nuclear plant in Lee County in Cherokee County up near Gaffney. I think that's got to be a big part of the equation. They don't generate the greenhouse gases. And somewhere down the line, nuclear's got to be more and more of our energy situation. The other things, unless we can store energy, nuke is going to be there for us in the future. That's my opinion.
I agree with you absolutely on that. Nuclear is your replacement fuel.
Yeah.
I think one of the themes here is in a way right now, we have a choice between a number of sort of different devils. I mean, we know of the dangers of coal-fired power plants, and we know the pollution that's associated with them, but they're relatively cheap in that we've got an infrastructure that's been using them for so long. We know also of the benefits of nuclear power, but also the cost of dealing with the waste that's produced and how we're going to deal with that. I think with regard to solar and other alternative means, Mike is right that the storage capacity there, the technology hasn't developed yet for us to be able to do that in an efficient way that's cost effective in order to compete with these other sources. I think what is being proposed here is that we do have efficiency technology that can slow the curve down sufficiently that hopefully technology will catch up with us and we don't have to make those decisions as policymakers and as people in the community quite yet. And if we can slow that curve down enough and technology catches up, maybe we have a better solution.
Other questions?
Thank you all. I can't resist asking the political question. 2 weeks ago, Marion University actually hosted Senator Lindsey Graham here, where he stated that he felt climate change was real and a threat to our national security. And then last week, he came out in an op-ed that he co-authored with Massachusetts Senator John Kerry in the New York Times, saying that we need to move toward a clean energy and energy-independent future. I was just curious if you all could provide your reflections on Senator Lindsey Graham's leadership on these issues.
I'll start. I don't disagree with what he's saying as far as moving toward more clean energy. My issue is that if we run jobs out of North America, if we do something with cap and trade that pushes our jobs in North America to China and to India and to Brazil and to the underdeveloped world, we're going to make global warming worse. Because again, as I said earlier, for every $1,000 of GDP, China puts out 5 times more greenhouse gases than the United States. Brazil is 3 times. India is 3.5 times. China has now displaced the United States as the #1 greenhouse producer. If you talking about CO2, the #1 greenhouse gas, by the way, is water vapor, but CO2 is something that we need to control. So we've got to be smart in how we do cap and trade, because if all we do is dislocate jobs, we've made global warming, climate change worse, not better.
If you're a co-op member, read your November edition of SC Living. I did an interview with Senator Graham this Tuesday where I sat down with him personally in Washington and went through a series of questions about why he did the op-ed. I was talking about politics needn't be a full contact sport in this state if we're going to get things done. I applaud him for taking the contact sport out of it. You can go up to Washington and wave a red flag and feel good, well, I vented, or you can go up to Washington and make things happen, and I'm glad that he's committed to making things happen. I'll say the same thing about Jim Clyburn, John Spratt, and others that on the House side worked hard to try to take the Waxman-Markey bill from where it was to where it is now. I joined with Ann Timberlake in an op-ed in the state paper back in July, thanking them. I hope there's going to be some type of similar thanks to Senator Graham soon from a group of people representing different perspectives saying, we appreciate you taking this on. And we elect our senators and we think they're our people. But folks, there are 99 other senators in the country elected by their constituents who all tell them that they're right. And when they go to, if you go to Washington thinking, I've got a monopoly on intelligence or a monopoly on what's right, and you refuse to sit down and negotiate, we don't have a democracy, we've got anarchy.
Well, without really taking a policy position necessarily on the climate change legislation that's up in D.C. at this time, I would say that it's very refreshing to have someone be able to draw attention to the national security implications of our energy resources here in our country. We know we often talk about the environmental impact, we often talk about the economic impact, but there is a real security issue related with energy, and I think it's great that we have that on the national agenda to be thinking about.
I am willing to take a policy position. Dr. Carter asked for some disagreement. We may have a little bit, but not much, I don't think, Senator. I am in favor of the cap and trade proposals and in favor of the statements Senator Graham has made, as has Senator Kennedy. I know there's a concern about loss of jobs overseas, and I think that's a very real concern. But I don't think we can let it affect our energy policy, nor can it affect our wage and hour laws or any other quality of life or standard of living we have in this country. Those need to be addressed through our trade policy and trade agreements, and they're very real issues. I certainly don't think we can let China continue to operate under a different standard, or India or any other competitor overseas, but we have to be able to maintain the quality of life here in this country as well.
I think that's a nice finishing touch. I would like to thank the panelists, if you don't mind. And ask Barbara if she'd like to come up with some final logistics. Notes.
And I'd like to thank Suzanne and all our panelists for an informative discussion about the potential for a brighter and cleaner energy future for our state. And a special thank you to Peggy Brown, the League of Women Voters of South Carolina's Natural Resources Director, who coordinated this event for the League. And the League is proud to co-host this educational forum with Francis Marion University. And special thanks to Dr. Fred Carter for his leadership on the issues of energy and the environment, and to his staff, and particularly Libby Cooper, who's somewhere in the room, for all of her hard work on this event. And special thanks to Nancy Cave with the Coastal Conservation League. She was womaning the microphone a few minutes ago. And to John Ramsberg with the Conservation Voters for their considerable support. We look forward to ACEE's policy recommendations for improving energy efficiency in our state, and we're going to work hard to implement sound policies that protect our environment and public health, that create jobs, and that lower utility bills in South Carolina. And we have a special little gift for our panel. It's a copy of Know Your State. It's the League of Women Voters of South Carolina's latest publication. It's everything you wanted to know about our state government and how it operates.